Continuing with the next MCQ, the question states that the heart acts as a pump, pushing blood through the circulatory system, and a diagram is provided showing the direction of blood flow. We are asked to identify the point where blood pressure is the greatest. To answer this, we first identify the labeled parts of the heart on the diagram. A represents the right atrium. B represents the pulmonary artery. C represents the aorta. D represents the left atrium. Blood pressure is greatest at the point where the strongest contraction of the heart occurs. This happens when the left ventricle contracts, as it pumps blood into the aorta. The left ventricle has very thick muscular walls because it must pump blood to the entire body in the systemic circulation. This requires a much higher pressure. In contrast, the right ventricle only pumps blood to the lungs via the pulmonary artery, which requires much less pressure. When comparing the two main arteries leaving the heart, the aorta carries blood under the highest pressure, as it receives blood directly from the powerful contraction of the left ventricle. The pulmonary artery carries blood at a lower pressure because it is supplied by the right ventricle. Therefore, the point where blood pressure is greatest is C, the aorta. So, C is the correct answer. Moving on to the next question, it asks, a person's cuts and grazes do not heal and their blood does not clot easily. What may be the cause of these symptoms? To answer this, we need to recall how blood clotting works. Clotting mainly depends on platelets and clotting proteins such as fibrinogen. If blood fails to clot properly, it indicates a problem in this clotting mechanism. Let's assess the options. In this question, we are told that a person's cuts and grazes do not heal properly and that their blood does not clot easily. This immediately suggests a problem with the blood clotting process. Normal clotting requires several components, particularly platelets and clotting proteins such as fibrinogen, which work together to form a clot and stop bleeding. If the level of fibrinogen were higher than normal, clotting would actually be faster, not slower, so this cannot explain the symptoms. Red blood cells are mainly involved in transporting oxygen around the body and do not have a direct role in clot formation, so a problem with red blood cells would not cause poor clotting. Similarly, iron is required for the production of hemoglobin in red blood cells, but it is not directly involved in the clotting mechanism. However, if there is a lower than normal number of platelets in the blood, the initial platelet plug cannot form effectively at the site of a wound. As a result, bleeding continues for longer and cuts and grazes heal slowly. Therefore, the most likely cause of these symptoms is a reduced platelet count, making option C the correct answer. In this question, the scenario describes the use of a heart-lung bypass machine during heart surgery. This machine temporarily replaces the normal functions of the heart and lungs, allowing the surgeon to stop the heart safely while the operation is performed. During this process, blood is taken out of the body, supplied with oxygen by the machine, and then returned to the circulation. To remove blood from the body, the tubes must be inserted into the blood vessel that normally carries deoxygenated blood back to the heart from the body. This vessel is the vena cava. Both the superior and inferior vena cava transport deoxygenated blood into the right side of the heart, so diverting blood from the vena cava allows it to be removed before it reaches the heart. Once the blood has been oxygenated by the bypass machine, it needs to be returned to the circulation through the vessel that normally carries oxygenated blood from the heart to the rest of the body. This vessel is the aorta. Returning blood into the aorta ensures that oxygen-rich blood is distributed efficiently to all tissues. Therefore, the correct answer is the option stating the blood is removed from the vena cava and returned to the aorta, which is option A. Next, we move on to a theory question about the human heart and circulation. In the first part, the question asks us to name the chamber of the heart with the thickest wall. This chamber is responsible for pumping blood to the entire body in the systemic circulation and therefore has to generate the highest pressure. Because of this heavy workload, it has the thickest muscular wall. So the answer is simply, the left ventricle. In the second part, we are asked to state what causes the sound of the heartbeat. The familiar lub-dub sound is produced by the closing of the heart valves. The first sound lub is caused by the closing of the atrioventricular valves, while the second sound dub is caused by the closing of the semolina valves. So, we can write that the heartbeat sound is caused by the closing of the heart valves. The third part asks us to name the blood vessel that carries blood from the aorta to the liver. Blood vessels that supply organs from the aorta are usually named after the organ they serve. The vessel that supplies oxygenated blood to the liver is the hepatic artery. So here we will write, hepatic artery. Finally, the fourth part asks us to state one function of blood plasma. Plasma is the liquid part of blood and plays a major role in transport. It carries dissolved substances such as digested food, hormones, carbon dioxide, and waste products like urea. It also helps transport blood cells and heat around the body. A suitable answer would be, transport of digested food substances, or transport of hormones, or transport of excretory products such as urea. Now we move on to another theory question related to human blood components and their functions. This question focuses on human blood components and their functions. In the first part, you are asked to match each component of blood with its correct function. For example, the red blood cell is already matched with transporting oxygen. Platelets are responsible for clotting, plasma transports fibrinogen, phagocytes engulf pathogens, and lymphocytes produce antibodies. The second part of the question asks how a red blood cell is specialized for transporting oxygen. Red blood cells contain hemoglobin, which allows them to bind and carry oxygen efficiently. They do not have a nucleus, which provides more space for hemoglobin. Additionally, their small size and flexible structure enable them to squeeze through narrow capillaries, ensuring oxygen reaches all tissues. Finally, their biconcave shape increases the surface area, allowing oxygen to diffuse rapidly into and out of the cell. Any three of these features explain how red blood cells are perfectly adapted for oxygen transport. So we will write, red blood cells contain hemoglobin to bind and carry oxygen, lack a nucleus to provide more space for hemoglobin, and have a biconcave shape that increases surface area for rapid oxygen diffusion. We now come to the final question of this practice paper. This question is based on figure 3.1, which shows diagrams of blood flow into and out of 3 major organs through blood vessels labeled P to U. In the first part, you are asked to identify the blood vessels. Blood vessel Q is the pulmonary vein, blood vessel R is the renal artery, and blood vessel U is the hepatic vein. The second part asks you to compare the structures of blood vessels Q and R. Blood vessel Q, being a vein, has a thin wall composed of thin muscle and elastic tissue, a wide lumen, and contains valves to prevent backflow of blood. In contrast, blood vessel R, an artery, has a thick wall made of thick muscle and elastic tissue, a narrow lumen, and does not have valves, which allows it to withstand and maintain the high pressure of blood pumped from the heart. This structural comparison highlights the differences between veins and arteries in adapting to their functions in the circulatory system. So we will simply write, blood vessel Q is vein, which has a thin wall, wide lumen, and valves to prevent backflow, while blood vessel R is an artery which has a thick wall, narrow lumen, and no valves to withstand high blood pressure. This was all about Chapter 11, including the chapters and past papers. I hope my videos help you a lot. Stay tuned for the upcoming videos in this course. I'll see you again. Thanks for watching.